Start, and you're on.
Hi everyone, and welcome to week 4 of our Lassoed by Marriage book club. We are on week 4, but tonight we're going to talk to Lisa Carter, who wrote the third story in our book. And we had some technical difficulties last week, and I think we're all set to go right now. So I'm going to turn this over to Angie, and she's going to introduce Lisa, and we'll carry on with our discussion.
Hi everybody, I'm so excited to see you all. I'm coming to you live from Hershey, Pennsylvania. I'm at the Month's Christian Product Expo, and I just have to tell you, while I was here today, we found out that the Lassoed by Marriage romance collection from Barber Publishing went to the top 20 on the ECPA bestsellers list. So I am excited to
You guys, I'm sure.
I am so excited to introduce to you my sister author, Lisa Carter. She is out here on the East Coast with you all, so she's had no problem with the time change. But I wanted to tell you, Lisa and I were trying to remember when we first met, because we've known each other for a few years now. We've also been in a book collection called The Quilts of Love, and that was from Abingdon. And she and I met each other at a dinner, and our editors, they sometimes have a suite at these bigger conferences, and we met each other there for the first time. And she's such a delightful person. And not only is she delightful in person, but that comes out in her voice, in her books, and in her writing. And we figured it out too that as sister authors now, this is our second time being sister authors, so I think that must make it permanent. But for now, I want to introduce you to the very lovely, very adorable, and very humorous Lisa Carter. Here she is.
Hello, everyone. She's built me up. She has built me up to be something that I hope that I can live up to, but I'm so glad to be with you all here tonight. It was very disappointing not to be able to talk to you last week, but I hope that we can talk a little bit about Mule Dazed tonight if you have any questions. And I just wanted to share with you maybe some things you didn't know about what it's like to be an author, kind of what a day in the life of an author is like. Like you, I always loved to read, and out of that desire to read as a child, I became sort of the Phineas and Ferb of my neighborhood. If you've ever seen that children's cartoon show, it's about two boys who make up these fantastic adventures for the neighborhood children to live out, and that was sort of what my childhood was like. I spent a lot of time, I'm that golden era of TV generation where I spent a lot of time, my brother and I, watching all those wonderful westerns like Big Valley and Bonanza and High Chaparral, and you probably got your favorites too. But we would watch those, and then we would go out into the yard, and the neighborhood children would gather, and taking basically what I had been looking at on TV currently, I would just sort of make up stories, and the neighborhood children would act them out. And it got to the point that in the summertime, they would come over to our house, and they would say, "What are we going to pretend like today?" And usually my tales involved kind of a combination of Little House on the Prairie meets Bonanza, maybe meets Star Trek, because we were really into the Star Trek series too. So it was kind of a Western historical sci-fi thing going on in our yard most summers. And so that's kind of how this whole storytelling began for me. As a child, my mother read to us as children, as a lot of mothers do, but after she would turn out the light, I would continue the story in my head. Or if I saw something on a television show that I didn't like the ending, or I thought it could have been better in a different way, I would make up a story to tell myself a story to go to sleep at night. And, you know, I really thought that probably everybody did that until I got to school, and I realized that it might make me seem a little bit odd if I told people that I made up stories in my head. So for many years, during those adolescent years of my life, I was very quiet about this secret desire that I had to write and to tell stories. You know, people respond to stories. That's something I've realized as I've studied the Bible. Jesus told stories in parables, and there's just something about a story that touches people's hearts. And as a believer, my goal has always been for my stories, which I believe God gives me, to be able to touch people, to help them to see God maybe in a different way, to bring them closer to Him and glorify Him and further His kingdom. And so that is always my goal when I'm writing a story. And it was sort of funny how the whole Lassoed by Marriage romance collection came about for me. I heard about that the editors at Barber were looking for stories to put into this collection, and I also heard that the trope was going to be this whole kind of a forced arranged marriage kind of thing, and that's what started me thinking about Mule Dazed. I am from North Carolina, and here we have a little town called Benson, North Carolina, where they have something called Mule Dazed. And it's a week-long festival where people from all over the United States come. There's parades. There's a lot of different really fun kind of things, events that I try to incorporate into my own Mule Day celebration that takes place in fictional Hitching Post, Montana. And when I was doing research for this story, the initial idea came to me, and I really didn't know a whole lot about a Mule Days kind of festivity. I think I attended the one in Benson when I was a child, but that's been a long, long time ago, and I'm not going to tell you how long ago that was. But when doing my research, I realized that there's a lot of places in the United States that hold these Mule Days type festivities. Sometimes they're called breeder days, and it all originated back in the 1800s when it was just a good excuse for people in these far-flung communities to get together. They would trade horses, they would trade mules, there were quilting bees, there were all kinds of activities, and a lot of courting naturally went on during these events. And so in my research I discovered that there are Mule Day events in Montana, in Colorado, Oregon. In fact, Columbia, Tennessee is the self-proclaimed mule capital of the world, which was something that I didn't know, and now you too have learned this very interesting fact about Columbia, Tennessee. But I don't really always know how the ideas come to me. They just sort of come, and they come in different ways. I do feel that God gives me these stories. Some of them are really fun, and I hope that you enjoyed reading Mule Days. It was a fun story for me to write, and I hope that readers have enjoyed reading the story as much as I had, as much fun as I had writing it. But I've always been fascinated by people and their stories. And some of the stories that God has given me have been really easy to tell. Mule Days was an easy, fun stories. Angie mentioned that she and I were writers in another series, another collection called The Quilts of Love Books by Abington, and my story in that particular series was called Aloha Rose, and it was set in Hawaii, and that was an easy story to tell. But some of them have been hard stories, and those take a lot out of you, but I feel like that God always gives me a story that maybe someone needs to hear, or maybe it's something that He even wants me, an issue that He wants me to work out. And so basically for me, writing has been really cheap therapy. And my husband is really glad of that. You know, it keeps me out of the stores, if nothing else. And so he's enjoyed this writing career of mine. One of the scriptures that I wanted to tell you about that was kind of summed up for me what was going on with Mule Dazed. Hattie, who is the heroine in the story, she's an adventurous kind of gal. You know, my favorite movie in the whole world is Indiana Jones, the whole series, actually, of Indiana Jones. I wanted to be Indiana Jones, basically, when I was a little girl, and the real-life model for Indiana Jones was an archaeologist, anthropologist. His name was Roy Chapman Andrews, and he says that there is an adventure around every corner, and the world is still full of corners. And that's kind of how I approach my life, looking for the adventure that God has for me, the adventure maybe that He wants me to tell in each particular story. And so for me, when I found this verse in Romans chapter 8, verses 14 and 15, it summed up kind of my philosophy of life, and also I think that Hattie, if she were sitting here talking to you tonight, that's something she would really enjoy, and pretty much this is how she's modeled her life. But I'm reading from the translation called The Message, which is a more modern day translation, but it goes, God's Spirit beckons. There are things to do and places to go. This resurrection life you received from God is not a timid, grave-tending life. It's adventurously expectant, greeting God with a childlike, "What's next, Papa?" And I just love that translation of Romans 8, 14 and 15, because I hope for you, and certainly the way I try to live my life, is that this life that God has given us is, and it should be, adventurously expectant. Because of all the people in the world, we have a great story to tell. The story of Jesus and what He has done. Whether you are an author or not, there is that story that you can tell with your life, which is His story, because history is literally God's story. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my process then for coming up with Mule Dazed. I loved that trope, that whole romantic idea of arranged or forced marriages. And truthfully, the whole thing came to me in a middle of the night kind of inspiration. My agent, Tamala, who's also Angie's agent, had told me about this thing that they were looking for, and I had this kind of idea, but I didn't know necessarily what to do with it, and it was one of those nights. I don't know if you ever have those kind of nights. I just had a hard time going to sleep, and I was thinking and thinking about this idea and what I could do for this collection. So I got up and I went downstairs, and just 3 o'clock in the morning, thinking and thinking. I was probably getting a little silly at that point, and just the whole thing kind of came to me, and I thought, how fun would it be to do this whole thing about mules? And I don't really know where else it came from except from God in the middle of the night. But for me, when I'm getting ready to write a story, the characters are really important to me. I'm not able to write the story until I have visualized in my head what Hattie and Brax, for instance, in Mule Dazed really look like. They truly, like the Bible says, have to live, move, and have their being. They have to come to life for me so that I can make them come to life for readers. So what I normally do is, once I get a book idea going, is I start looking for pictures of actors or models or well-known people, because generally it's easier to find pictures on the internet of them, and I just sort of collect them. I get in my mind what Hattie looks like, or I get in my mind what Brax looked like. I pick an actor and I find pictures of them on the internet, pictures of them when they're smiling, when they're sad, or when they're angry looking in some role that they've been playing, and then I put them all together in a file which I create. Scrivener is a tool that a lot of writers use to write novels, and so I have that program on my computer, and it enables me to put all my research and all my chapters as I write them all in one place, so that everything is in one place and easy to find when I need it. And another additional benefit of finding photos of my characters, even finding photos of the place that the story will be set. I will create Pinterest boards for each of my books, and so I invite all of you to find me on Facebook and Pinterest and Twitter. I love to connect with readers, but I will have a board for my books so that you can kind of see some of the places that were in my mind as I was writing the story, and I also give more background information of the story of that particular book. And so this story came together based on my growing up watching Little House on the Prairie, Bonanza, Big Valley, and all of those wonderful old westerns, plus the only time I have ever actually been to Montana, which, Angie, I bet you didn't know this. A few years ago, I have two girls, and they're both big into horse riding, and we decided as a family to go to a dude ranch, and it was near Fortine, Montana, which is sort of, I think, not that far from the Canadian border, but it was the Laughing Water Ranch near Fortine, Wyoming, and it was a great week where I got to ride horses, and I was the novice in the group. My husband, my children were much better than me, but I was able to just smell Montana, and I know that sounds strange, but I was able to experience, the sounds in the forest and on the mountain and the babbling brook, and the setting for me really came to life. And so I tried to paint those word pictures for readers too, so that Hitching Post, Montana, my fictional town, would come to life for readers. And so my process, and I wanted you to know that every writer is different in the way they go about things. If we were to interview Angie tonight and ask her, what is it you do from start to finish, she would probably have a different way of doing things. Mary Keneally would have a different way. All of the writers in this collection will have a different way of going about this process of writing a story, because God works in all of us differently. Some of us like to plot everything out from the beginning to end before they ever sit down and write a word, and others like me like to live on the edge, where life is truly an adventure, and we have this idea. We know what the characters look like in our heads. We know what the setting is going to be, and then we just start writing. And so literally every scene, every chapter is an adventure for us, because we don't know what's going to happen. I never knew what was going to come out of Hattie's mouth, and that's what made it so fun. The one time that I actually planned and plotted and outlined a story was the only novel I have never finished, because I knew what was going to happen in the end, and I was bored at that point. I mean, what was the point of writing the rest of it if I already knew what was going to happen? But it was not that way when I was writing Mule Dazed, because each chapter, each scene unfolded, and I was going along on the adventure with Hattie and Brax. And for me, that's the way I like to work. It's also very frightening to write that way, I will tell you that, because it makes a woman of faith out of me as I write this way, because I really have to depend on God, because I don't know what's coming. He does, and I have to depend on him to show me what's going to happen next. So for me, as you can see, there's a lot of pre-writing, I think, that goes on in my process, where I'm uncovering, discovering the story for myself, and I give myself permission to play, and that's when the ideas kind of come to me, where they emerge from that place, that creative well that God has placed inside authors, because he's hardwired our brains to think in a certain way, and we might look normal on the outside, but truly, if you talk to us for long stretches of time, you would realize that we're really not normal. The normal ship sailed without us a long time ago, and that's what I discovered as a child at going to school. I learned very quickly not to share the way that I told myself a story to go to sleep, because not everybody did that, and most people would think that was a little strange. But there is a creative well I think, in all of us. God has gifted all of us with certain skills and talents and abilities. And part of it, I think, is finding what your creative outlet, your talent is. You may be a wonderful seamstress. You may be able to paint or draw. You may have great athletic ability. You may be a dancer. There's just all kinds of wonderful ways that God has gifted us. And then what you do is you find that creative place in yourself, and you have to feel that creative well, is what I call it, inside yourself. And when it overflows, that wellspring is where you get your best work. And so for me, this pre-writing phase is where I'm filling the well, where I'm looking on the internet for pictures of who I think Hattie is and who I think Brax is, and finding pictures where, like in this next novella that I'm writing for Barbara, there's going to be this prairie fire, and I'm finding, you know, pictures of that to help me imagine the scene for myself. And it's a lot of work, but it's fun work because you're finding story treasure when you do that. So I'm thinking a lot before I start writing. And then I'm also reading a lot. I tend to read a lot of historical novels when I'm writing a historical novel. I'm actually more well known probably for writing romantic suspense, contemporary romantic suspense. And so when I'm writing one of those novels, I'm reading a lot of romantic suspense. But what I do is all of this research I've done and all of the thinking I've done and all of the reading I've done, I let all of that, I throw that into this crock pot of creativity and let it simmer. And I continue to do these things, continue to read. Sometimes I get my best ideas when I'm doing the most routine things, like cleaning the house. And I'm going to tell you, if I'm really, really blocked and I start cleaning the house, you know that I have reached the level of desperation at that point, because cleaning the house, my family will tell you, is not my favorite thing to do. In fact, when I start cleaning the house, my children will often ask me, oh, who's coming over to visit? Because they know that's usually my cue for cleaning the house. Another place I get a lot of great ideas is when I walk or exercise. It's kind of like some kind of free-flowing stream of consciousness happens, that when my hands are occupied doing something rote or very mundane, my mind is still working on that story that I'm currently writing. But the very best place where I get my ideas is the shower. And in fact, my husband has created this nice little diagram for me based on our water bill. And you know how it's a bar graph? You can chart my novels by our water bill, and I'm not kidding. I mean, there will be one bar graph column up so high, and it'll be like, say, September. Oh, you were writing under a turquoise sky at that point. Here's another bar graph for December, really, really high. Oh, that was Beyond the Cherokee Trail. And you can literally chart my novels, because the months in between when I'm maybe marketing something or editing something, but not in that creative initial first draft process, it's off the charts with the water bill. Yeah, so I get a lot of great ideas. And I told y'all that was strange. I mean, I'm admitting we're just an odd group, us writers. But once I had gotten all of those kinds of things going in my brain, which is a very scary place, my children will say that to you also, I've created on this Scrivener program a visual montage of the people, even secondary characters, and the settings, the scenes where the chapters are going to take place. And then another fun thing I do in this writing process, and a lot of times people will see me sitting in front of the television and thinking I'm not working, and I'm really working. I'm watching Bonanza again to get myself back into the time frame of when Mule Dazed is going to take place. Or I'm watching, you know, whatever it is that helps me to get into that novel. You know, when I was writing Aloha Rose, which is set in Hawaii, I watched a lot of Hawaii Five-0. And I'm just going to say, for the first time in public that, yes, Kai Barnes was extensively modeled after Steve McGarrett on Hawaii Five-0. So, you know, that's something that just you all know. No one else knows that. I watched, when I was doing several books that were set on the Navajo reservations of Arizona and New Mexico, I watched a lot of Navajo Cops, which I bet you didn't even know that was a TV show. But it is on cable, and I found it. When I was writing Under a Turquoise Sky, for instance, it's about the Witness Protection Program, and I watched an old TV series called In Plain Sight. So even though it looks like I'm sitting on the couch doing nothing, I am actually in this pre-writing process of working on a novel. And so once I've got all of that going on, I'm also looking for things that are going to engage all of the senses. And just like I was telling you, like I was smelling Montana, and when I was there, I actually was thinking, I need to remember what it smells like. I didn't know that Mule Dazed would come along, but as a writer, no experience is ever wasted. Even something really, really sad, I can be crying, and this is what makes me so strange, y'all, and I'm so sorry, but I'm actually thinking while I'm crying, this will never be wasted. This is going to make such a great scene one day. And that happens to me. You know, it does. But the visual is probably the most obvious thing that authors have to use, because we're painting a visual picture with words, basically. But it becomes very rich and very layered if within your writing you can incorporate auditory things, like what does it sound like when the wind is sighing through the trees on a hillside in Montana. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll find a soundtrack that I really like that kind of puts me right into that story world that I'm creating. For instance, when I was writing Aloha Rose, which, you know, the wonderful Hawaiian setting, I used Brother Iz's Over the Rainbow, if you've ever heard the Hawaiian version of that classic song, and I would play that, and then as soon as that soundtrack ended, I'd be right ready to write the very next scene that was coming up where I was in the course of the novel. Smell, probably the strongest of the senses. If you can somehow capture that and put it into your chapter, touch, taste, all kinds of things are little tricks that authors use to make the setting come alive and make the characters feel real to you, as real as they are to us in our imaginations. And sometimes the setting becomes a character in its own right, and I think that's especially true and maybe the appeal that so many people have for historical romance fiction, because for all of us, we have this iconic image of the American West and what that means to us, because most of us have grown up watching Bonanza and shows like that, and as Americans, you can just set a story in a place like Montana or Wyoming, and immediately that strikes a chord, I think, with a lot of us. So that's basically my process. It's a lot of pre-writing in the thinking and just getting myself ready to write, the reading and the watching TV, of course. And then comes the moment when you've got to glue your butt into the chair, as we writers say, and start typing and just pray. I pray a lot. You know, writing has really made a praying woman out of me, because I don't know what's going to happen next from one scene to the next, and I've really got to depend on God to supply that need that I have. And so it's a fun thing. Sometimes it's a very stressful thing, I'll be honest, but it is a fun thing, and it's so fun to be able to talk with you ladies here today. And that was really all I wanted to say, Angie, unless, you know, folks have some questions.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to turn it over to the book club network, or the book club over at the Vine in Dyer, Indiana, to ask some questions. And we do have some people online that may like to ask some questions. And so if you do have a question online, if you can see the group chat sidebar, please feel free to tell me, just say me, and I'll click over on you and ask you to say your question. And I just want to mention really quick, we have also got our next author who's going to be with us is Rebecca Jepson, and she came on tonight, so I'd like to introduce her at the end. So Rebecca, when it comes toward the end, would you please turn on your camera and unmute so I can introduce you to everybody for next week. So Carol, I'm going to turn it back over to you for the moment for you all to be able to ask questions there in the store. And folks online, please let me know if you have a question, and if you are not on camera or on video, type it into the sidebar, and if you want to ask a question and you are on video and on sound, just say me and I'll come get you. All right. So ladies in the Vine in Dyer, Indiana, it's your turn.
I have a question. So I have to ask, what actress and actor is Hattie and Brax?
That is a good question. I can tell you the name of the guy in my mind who is Brax. It's an actor by the name of Logan Bartholomew, and he was in the second or third of the Love Comes Softly series. He ends up marrying the daughter and then becomes a sheriff, and then he dies later on. I mean, he was in 2 or 3 of them. The girl in my mind who looks like Hattie to me was also an actress in one of the Love Comes Softly movies, but she was towards the end, and I cannot keep them straight to tell you which movie she was in and what character she played, but she had blonde hair and it was very curly, and she was a very pretty girl, and I don't know if she was a granddaughter of the original characters in that series, but it was one of the later Love Comes Softly movies.
Okay. Oh, I did watch it. Yeah.
We just looked up Logan on someone's phone, so we approve.
Hey, wait a minute. You folks over there, if you have that looked up on the phone, bring it up to the camera so we can see it. That would be fun. I want to see who Logan is. All right, so whoever's phone it's on, bring it to the camera. Oh, bring it up a little closer and hang on. I'm presenting. Up higher.
That's him.
Oh, la la! Aren't you a cutie?
Yeah.
What other questions do we have there in Dyer, Indiana?
I have a comment. I grew up with 5 older brothers, and I'm the only girl and the youngest. So this story was just a blast for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. You've lived a hard life. You know what Hattie has been through.
Absolutely.
Lisa, could you froze a little there and went black. Can you are you still with us?
I am. I don't
Okay,
know
would you repeat it? Just the internet going in and out, sometimes it surges, and it'll just do that. So would you repeat what you said to the comment?
I said that she had had a hard life with all those brothers, and that she knew what Hattie had been through.
All right, so we're back to you all at the Vine in Dyer, Indiana. What other questions do you have?
What story is the Krispy Kremes going to be in?
The story of the Krispy Kremes?
Yeah.
I know that I used Krispy Kreme in my very first novel, which was Carolina Reckoning. That is a more traditional, what I think of as a cozy mystery. And then I think I used the Krispy Kreme again in the one that came out in September, which is called Beyond the Cherokee Trail, which is set in the mountains of North Carolina. So those two, to the best of my remembering, is where you will find some scenes with Krispy Kreme donuts.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
At the beginning of each chapter, you have a little quote along with "For the love of a mule." How did you come up with those? Are you that that close to mules?
No, I'm not close at all to any mules. What I did when I started researching other places that had mule days, like Benson, North Carolina, there were websites, complete websites out there, lots of them, that are dedicated to the celebration of the mule. And I'm reading through these websites, and I'm looking on to the sites of the places that host mule days, and I actually learned a lot about mules. And sometimes the things they said about mules struck me as funny. But again, we've established that I'm not necessarily normal. I don't think the authors of those websites meant the comments to be funny, but when I read them, it struck me as funny, and I could just see how Hattie would have responded if she had 21st century technology and she could actually read a website. And it just became obvious to me that Hattie would have written a book about mules, and these were the things she would have said.
What other thoughts or questions or experiences did you all have for Lisa or about the book? Oh, and let me say for the online folks, if you're joining us late, which we might have a few, this is the Lassoed by Marriage romance collection, and I'm going to just real quick hold up the book so that folks can see what we're talking about. There's 9 authors with 9 stories, each a 20,000-word novella, and it's from Barber Publishing, and it has these lovely deckled pages, and inside it has gorgeous artwork. And so this is the book that we are working through in this 9-week online book club. So if you didn't know, now you do, the Lassoed by Marriage romance collection, and it's a new bestseller on the ECPA bestseller list. So let me bring it back to you folks at the Vine, and what questions do you have? Or thoughts or experiences reading the book?
One of my questions didn't really have to do with the book, but it's more about you, Lisa. Do you have a favorite author, and why is that person your favorite?
I have a lot of different favorite authors depending on the genre that I'm reading. I read a lot of general market for like cozy mysteries. As far as romantic suspense, there are just so many, like Danny Petrie, Lynette Eason, Diane Mills, and I'm going to, I know by naming I'm going to leave out people. As far as contemporary romance, Becky Wade and Catherine Palmer, and just, again, I'm leaving out Lisa Wingett. There's just lots of folks that I love to read their stuff. I have written these contemporary romantic suspense novels for Abington. The last one in that group is coming out in March, actually. That's when my next book releases. It's called The Stronghold. And then I also write a contemporary romance series with Love Inspired. It's based on a small place on the eastern shore of Virginia, which is a lot like the Outer Banks of North Carolina, a really wonderful beach community where I've created a fictional town on the eastern shore, which is an actual place. And it's a Coast Guard series, and also revolves around the lives of these people, kind of eccentric people in this small town in Virginia. So I read a lot of the authors that write for Love Inspired as well. Historical writers, Laura France, Mary Keneally, a lot of these ladies that are in the collection. I was just so thrilled to be able to be part of something that put me with such great company, like Angie and all the others. So, you could name a genre, and I could probably tell you a favorite author that I have in that.
What other thoughts or questions do you all have?
Okay, I'm waiting for everyone else, but I've got a couple things. So, can you tell us what the favorite story that you've written is and why?
Mule Days was a lot of fun, but probably My favorite story, well, you know, and see again, it's this normal shit business. These books are sort of like your children, and you know, you can't really come out and say that you have a favorite, even though secretly in your heart, you know, you may like one more than the other. I mean, you know, some children are just obnoxious. I taught school, I can say that. Some of them just are, you know. You love them anyway, but they can just be obnoxious. And some books are a lot harder to write for whatever the subject matter happens to be. Some of them are very hard and painful depending on where you're coming from. But probably my favorite, and this is just again between us, you know, let's don't tell anybody this, but probably my favorite was Under a Turquoise Sky. The characters in that just really came alive for me. They were a lot of fun. Basically, my character in that book, she accidentally witnesses a drug cartel execution and then has to go in the witness protection program, and that doesn't work out so well for her either. So she's on the run with a federal agent who's trying to keep her alive until the trial, and the book is about, basically, it's a romance-a-thon. From Charlotte to Shiprock is what I call it, because they're dodging bullets and bombs and everything else at the same time they're falling in love. And so it was just the most fun to write. It was a great adventure for me. And also, that book won the Carroll Award this year for romantic suspense. And it was just so fun. Just to think about those characters still makes me smile.
Can you tell us what characters or what TV shows did you watch when you were doing that one?
That one I watched a lot of In Plain Sight, which is about the witness protection program. And it also happened to be set in New Mexico, which is where Under a Turquoise Sky takes place. So that was very helpful. And I read as much as I could find on the witness protection program, which, you know, there's really not a lot out there, and you can guess why. And then the rest of the information, I'm not going to be able to tell you my sources, or I'd have to kill you.
Thank you for that.
What else would you all like to know from Lisa tonight?
Is Lisa at the in Hershey, Pennsylvania, or is she at her home?
Oh, Lisa is at her home, and I would like you to point out, Lisa, if you don't mind, behind you, that those are your books. So do you want to just point them out for us real quick?
Okay, let's see.
You
at
can
the top.
It's okay.
See my hand. Is Carolina Reckoning. That is set in North Carolina. Vines of Entanglement is set also in North Carolina. Both of those are what I call more traditional cozy mysteries. It's Southern fiction, also Native American fiction, kind of a blend of that. And those, you know, are really for folks that like Southern fiction, because Southerners, we're just a fun group. I can't help it. We just are a fun group, and a lot of people like those more traditional mysteries. Over here, I'm pointing again by my head, is Beyond the Cherokee Trail, which is set in the mountains of North Carolina, and Beyond the Navajo Moon. Beneath the Navajo Moon, I'm going to get it in a minute. Beneath the Navajo Moon is set in Arizona, and I have blended with all of my books a lot. It's contemporary, but I also try to blend history into the story. There's always kind of a backstory, maybe even a split narrative is what I call it, where we've got the perspective of our main character set in contemporary times, but maybe the next chapter is with a character from the past, recent past, or maybe even 100 years ago, that in the end, all of those characters will come together and affect the modern story. And so Beneath a Navajo Moon is set in Arizona, and then I'm going down here. There's my first love-inspired that came out last year, Coast Guard Courtship, which is the Eastern Shore of Virginia that I was telling you about. The second one of those comes out in May. It's called Coast Guard Sweetheart, and Carol, that was another one that was really fun to write. This Coast Guard series is based on 4 sisters in this family on the eastern shore of Virginia, and basically each of the original books follows their happily ever after. And so the second sister is the one that is coming out in May, Coast Guard Sweetheart, and the characters were, again, just really fun, and it turned out the romance was kind of your take your breath away Calgon kind of moment at the end, and it was a lot of fun for me to write that scene as well. And then you see Lassoed by Romance Collection, and then there's Aloha Rose, which has a quilt that forms a central part of the story, and actually the quilt and its maker are a mystery. And all of that comes together in the end to affect the outcome of those characters happily ever after. And then over here on the other side of me, you can see Under a Turquoise Sky. And I think that's all that I have right now out.
The other books that are on the bookcase, are they the books that you have there, are they some of your research books, or are they some of the books that you've read because you just enjoy them and they're your keepers? What are they?
A lot of the books are just my own books that I've read. I've got a lot of travel books because I used to write a travel column. I love to travel. That's kind of my passion is traveling, and generally, I blog about some of my travels. Any place I go, you can guarantee that eventually that's going to make its way into a story of mine. And I've been very blessed to be able to go a lot of places, and it's been a lot of fun because, as my English professor in college once told me, I could make going to the bathroom seem like a thrilling adventure. And so when I go anywhere, it's just a lot of fun for me.
I'm the same way. I've been even putting up on Facebook all of my different adventures on research here in Pennsylvania, because I came several days before the conference in order to do research. So we have so much in common. It's really fun. And I'm going to ask the store if you all have any more questions. If not, I would like to introduce Rebecca for next week.
I have a question.
A question?
Yes, I do. Do you then, when you're traveling, like you said you went to Montana, do you keep a notebook, make notes, or something you can refer back to, or a tape record or something?
I do. I take a little notebook with me on these trips, and I try to keep track of my itinerary and write my impressions. I will, maybe briefly mention where I am, what city, or what's going on, but mainly it's about how that place makes me feel, or what I learn about that place, some of the history, some of the flora and the fauna. My husband and I recently celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary, and we were able to do one of those bucket list trips. We went to Machu Picchu and also to the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador, and the whole time, I've got my little notebook as I'm trekking through the Amazon, and I get back to the room, and I'm just trying to keep it all in my head, all the things that I have learned that day, the animals, the sounds, the smells, and that's going to be a book one day. I mean, you just know it is.
But any other thoughts or impressions? And Rebecca, can you unmute and come on with your camera? And hopefully hers will work out so we can do this. It'll be fun. And while she's doing that, anyone else have thoughts?
I have a question. The titles for your books, do you know what they are, like at the beginning? Do you make your title at the end? How do you come up with the titles for all your books?
That's a good question. A lot of times the title comes to me during the course of writing a book. Abington was especially good about letting me select most of the titles for those romantic suspense novels. Love Inspired, it's a collaborative effort with the editorial team with them to have come up with the Coast Guard series of titles that we have. There's 3 initial ones, and then we're doing 4 more that will be based on the residents of the town. We're kind of expanding out from the Coast Guard station. So sometimes it's something in the theme or the issue, the topic that will trigger something for me in the title. And in fact, Vines of Entanglement came to me one time on a Sunday afternoon when I was driving to pick up my children from youth group. I have no idea why. It just popped in my head driving down the road, but that is where I got the title from.
Oh, I just accidentally hid our book club. Hold on. Just, 1 second, sorry. There we go. You should be coming back. Sorry about that, ladies. I hit the wrong drop-down button. Do you have any other questions? No? Did I mute you too? Can you say something just so I can see? Oh my. Oh my. Can you? You'll have to get up and unmute because I can't unmute you. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, ladies, for having me tonight.
And I want to thank you, Lisa, because I really enjoyed, sorry, camera's in a weird spot. I really enjoyed listening to your process, how that went. So thank you. It was really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy reading, everyone.
Hang on, and I'll see if I can bring up Rebecca. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see or hear her. She said her camera's not working, so if she'll unmute, she'll be able to see her picture. And there's our lovely Rebecca, and we'll fix her camera for next week. And Rebecca, are you able to unmute and say hi?
I unmuted, but I'm not sure if it's working.
We can hear you. Yay!
Oh, perfect. Hi there, Indiana.
Hi, Rebecca.
So Rebecca's going to be with us next week, and her book is called A Highbrow Hoodwink. And so, and it's really fun because we are, from some of these, we went from 1865 to 1900 to 1885 to 1897, and now we're going to go to Colorado in 1883. And I'm excited to read hers this week because my grandfather was born in 1883, and so I'm really going to have fun with the year that it was written in and see what kind of research and things I can learn from that. So I'm going to say thank you to Rebecca for coming in to say hi to you all. Thank you so much to Lisa for coming in and being with us. And then thank you so much to the Vine at Faith Church in Dyer, Indiana. You ladies are amazing. And this all is recording right now, and it will go to the YouTube playlist that we have going on my YouTube channel, and it's on youtube.com at Angela Breidenbach, and it's Breidenbach, and there's a playlist, and that playlist is called Lassoed by Marriage. So if you want to see any of them, if you missed any, if we have some new ladies there tonight or some new viewers and people that want to be involved in the book club and want to catch up, you can do that. If you have friends that have not been able to come and participate in any way, they have kids' activities, they work, whatever, they can do it online through the videos as well, through the playlist. And I believe I've sent a link already over, but I'll do that again. I'll post it on Twitter, on my Facebook. The ladies will have it to post on their social media and websites as well. and then Carol and Sue will have it there for the Vine at Faith Church in Dyer, Indiana. And we want to welcome everyone out there in the whole wide world that's watching this by video, whether you're watching it live or you're watching it later. We're so glad you joined us, and we thank you so much, and we hope that you'll enjoy the book that we are all reading through, including the authors, is called The Lassoed by Marriage Romance Collection from Barber Publishing. It published on January 1st, 2016. There are 9 stories in this book, and we're having a great time because all of the authors have at least 8 stories they never got to read. And so now we're getting to read those and catch up as well. So thank you for being with us in the online book club. Thank you for being with us in the in-person book club. And we're just delighted to have had this time with you. So I do want to ask one last question. Do we have any newbies this week over there in Dyer, Indiana?
No, I think everyone that's here has been here before.
Yay! And you were all putting your entries in for your in-person grand prize drawing, right? Yay! And did you all get your book plates to put in for your autographed book plates for each author so far?
Yeah, Carol's going to go get the basket just to show you. It's really fun. I mean, I wish I could put my name in, but whoever gets this is going to be, hopefully very pleasantly surprised. It's really fun. So,
yeah, I haven't seen it. And all of us sent in gifts for the gift basket for people who are able to come in person. And you're going to have to hold it up real high. Oh, look at that. That's huge. Wow. Holy cow, and it's 3D. Wow. So
yeah, nice. It's really nice. So, I mean, I'm still amazed that the authors went to that trouble, and they all signed book plates for us and sent really nice, fun gifts, and I'm having a good time.
Yeah, great.
I think we're all having a really good time too. So I just thank you for having us, and we're just thrilled to connect because the whole reason we write is for readers, so if we don't get to ever meet anybody, we don't really know how we've connected. And the connecting with somebody through a book is the most intimate place you can be, is in somebody's head. And so for you all allowing us to spend time with you, and for you spending time in our very abnormal heads, as Lisa so eloquently pointed out, it's true. And we're just so grateful to have spent the time with you, both in story and in the real world. So thank you, and we will see you next week, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
Bye-bye.